Hi guys, welcome to Office Blokes React. I'm Office Bloke Dave.
I'm Office Bloke Mike.
I'm Office Bloke Daz.
And we're here to tell you why 100% of the Office Blokes spend time in this studio. It's a bit shit, that. It's clutching straws. I was trying. That's what happens when you try and think of it on the fly.
You've done better.
I've done much better. I've done much better. I'm sorry. I've let you guys down. I've let the Office Blokes down.
50% of
standard.
I've let 50% of Canadians down.
Only 50%.
Yeah, I've let the blow up doll down. Why 50% of Canadians live south of this line? I mean, the line, is it going to be the Arctic Circle?
It could be, yeah.
In fact, I'd be surprised if 50% lived above it.
Yeah, exactly. It could be into the USA.
Well, that's what I was thinking.
50% of Canadians move into the USA.
That's what I thought as soon as I saw that. I thought that's what it would mean, but who knows?
Yeah, it could be. Right, well, we'll get into it. This is from Real Life Law as well, which we've done videos of. Great channel.
Yeah.
Why 50% of Canadians live south of this line? Let's do it.
This video is made possible by Morning Brew. Start your day by catching up on the top news in business, finance, and tech in 5 minutes by subscribing with the link down in the description. Alright, so this is Canada.
That's a good name for a morning digestible news sort of thing, isn't it?
I wasn't listening.
Morning Brew.
What was that? I just wasn't paying. I was thinking about something else.
It was like news and sort of headlines and stuff. You wake up in the morning and I like that.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. We're not sponsored though.
No.
We all know that Canadians like to pretend they're further north than Americans are, but they're really not, and I'm going to prove it to you. This is the 49th parallel, the longest border between two countries anywhere in the world, and the one that's most often thought of as being the dividing line between Canada and America. It's true that most Americans do, in fact, live south of this line, but so do most Canadians. In fact, roughly 70% of all Canadians live south of the 49th, in this land shaded red. But we can go even lower. A full 50% of all Canadians live south of this line in this relatively tiny area shaded red. This means that most Canadians live further south than pretty much the entire US states of Washington, Montana, North Dakota, and obviously Alaska too. But I'm not done embarrassing Canada just yet. This is the southernmost point of Canada on Middle Island in Lake Erie. Zooming out to view more of the North American continent, would it surprise you if I told you that there are, in fact, more Americans who live north of this island than Canadians? Well, it shouldn't, because there are, and this is how. Here's the line of latitude drawn precisely over Middle Island's southernmost location. Clearly, all of Canada exists above this line, but a surprising amount of the United States does as well, including this tiny sliver of California. If you're from California, you can legitimately claim that some of your state goes further north than Canada's southernmost point does.
Wow.
With the line this far south, though, a lot of America's largest urban areas exist above Canada's southernmost point, like the entirety of Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Montana, South Dakota, North Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, Alaska, and most of Wyoming, Michigan, New York State, and Massachusetts. Added up together, this means that more Americans live north of Canada's southernmost point than Canadians do, which is kind of weird. In fact, approximately 80% of the entire Canadian population lives within just 100 miles of the United States border.
Wow.
But why? Canada is huge. Why do most Canadians live so close to the American border?
Because it's fucking freezing.
I was going to say, further north you go, it's brass.
Yeah.
I was just wondering whether or not someone's come up with the idea of building some sort of wall so the Canadians can't all just...
And getting them to pay for it.
Yeah.
No, I can understand the living thing when the border kicks down like that. It's just common sense, isn't it?
And you're also next door neighbours with the world's biggest economy as well. So
Sure. It's just bizarre though, and you got living in the 100 miles of where Alaska,
the border and
all
everything.
That kind of stuff as well.
Yeah, weird.
Well, let's start off with the fact that despite being a continent-sized country that's roughly the same size as all of Europe, Canada's population is small. Europe's population is around 750 million, while the almost equivalently sized Canada has a population of only 38 million.
Wow.
That's less people than live in California.
I didn't know there was only 38 million
me
Canadians.
neither.
That's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
Wow.
I thought it'd be a lot higher than that.
No, I did.
I thought it'd be at least on par with the UK, if not more. And we've got 60 odd, 70 million?
65, 68 million or something these days.
Wow.
Yeah.
Canada has a population of only 38 million. That's less people than live in California, and about the same amount as people who live in Poland. 38 million people can't possibly settle densely across an area of this huge size. And they haven't. Instead, Canada's small population exists in faraway, spread out pockets of population like Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, and most significantly, the dense urban and industrialized corridor here between Quebec City in the northeast and Windsor in the southwest. Half of Canada's entire population simply lives within this 700-mile stretch of land that includes Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, and Quebec City. And it's all because of geography and history. As you're probably aware, Canada can get pretty cold. Half of the country is covered by what's called the Canadian Shield, a huge area of exposed rock with only a tiny layer of topsoil where farming is effectively impossible and winter temperatures are severely cold. You just can't have people or civilization without food. So that effectively eliminates most of Canada from ever being able to have many big population centers. Instead, Canada's civilization developed down here away from the Shield, and where large-scale farming is actually possible. And it's possible primarily because of these. The Great Lakes. These are the largest collection of freshwater lakes anywhere in the world by surface area that pretty much act in a similar way as an inland sea does, like the Mediterranean or the Baltic. The lakes soak up heat and cool the air down in the summertime, and then they radiate that heat back out slowly throughout the autumn months, preventing the area that surrounds them from getting as cold as the areas that don't. When combined with the frequent influx of warm, moist air coming up from the Gulf of Mexico, this does wonders for warming up the surrounding region's climate. So because of this effect, the Quebec City-Windsor corridor has richer and deeper soil than anywhere else in Canada does, and that means that large-scale agricultural farming operations that can support a large population are possible here and almost nowhere else where it's just too cold and too rocky. The climate is so good here that it's even possible to grow fruit in orchards and even establish wineries. But the climate and agricultural potential is only half of the reason why this is where most Canadians live. The other reason is geopolitical significance and power projection. This is the St. Lawrence River, and it's one of the most historically significant rivers in all of world history. It contains the world's largest estuary, and for most of the past 5 centuries was the only easy way for the Europeans to explore the North American interior. Historically, European ships from the Atlantic could enter into the St. Lawrence and sail down only as far south as the dangerous and impassable Lachine Rapids here, which is conveniently right where the city of Montreal happened to be developed and settled. For hundreds of years, Montreal was the primary port town on the St. Lawrence and the gateway to the North American interior for ships sailing in from the Atlantic. But over the centuries, humanity expanded upon nature's limitations. Eventually, in the early 19th century, the Canadians constructed the Lachine Canal across Montreal Island to bypass those dangerous rapids and, combined with a complex series of other canals and locks across the other various lakes and canals that culminated with the St. Lawrence Seaway being opened up in 1959, ocean-going vessels could finally and freely travel all the way between the Atlantic and each of the Great Lakes, which established cities like Toronto, Buffalo, Detroit, Chicago, and Duluth as other important trading ports with access to the world's oceans. This is partly why cities like Chicago in particular became the epicenter of the American railway system. It's relatively centrally located within the country, and with access to the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence, goods can be imported and exported from here across the world's oceans. Because of all this, a massive amount of lucrative trade has flown along the St. Lawrence for decades, and all of it has to pass through the ports of Toronto, Montreal, and Quebec City, increasing all of these cities' prominence and leading to them becoming the top destinations for immigrants coming to Canada from abroad. Just look at the historical population data of Toronto and Montreal. In a single century between 1881 and 1986, Toronto's population absolutely exploded from a town of 86,000 people to a metropolis of 2.2 million, while Montreal went from about 150,000 people to 1.7 million in the same time period. That is why currently about 50% of all Canadians live south of this line, and why around 80% of Canadians live within 100 miles of the United States border. The border that's been closed for over a year now and is finally opening back up again next month. In response to COVID-19, Canada shut the entire border down with the United States to non-essential travel back in March 2020, and they're finally opening it back up again on August 9th after 1 year and 5 months. Which is the longest the US-Canada border has been shut down for since the War of 1812, more than 2 centuries ago. A lot of what's happening today is based on what happened yesterday or last week. As Canada's long border closure with America has finally ended, and as someone with friends in Canada who visited the country often from the States, these events directly impacted my life over the past year. I was literally in Canada in March before the border was closed, and left back to the United States without realizing that it would be nearly a year and a half until I would be able to return again. I wanted to understand why the border closure kept getting extended throughout this past year, and so I began keeping up with the events by reading the frequent short articles that were being posted to Morning Brew every morning. This is why I really love using Morning.
That was a lesson in segues. It really was.
It was a lesson in geographical knowledge, that, because that's just really interesting to me.
It's very, very, really interesting.
Yeah. I get the border kicks down like that, but at the same time, when you put it into perspective on a drawing like that, to understand the population where it's gathered in groups from the reasons why, brilliant.
Yeah, it puts into perspective, doesn't it? That seaway, the canal thing going all the way through now. Yeah, I didn't realise it went all the way through either now.
No, I didn't.
So it's it's incredible.
Yeah,
but when you've got the biggest economies in the States, I think are Texas and California, aren't they?
Probably.
And the biggest economy in Canada is the bit that kind of comes down into the States, but not into the American biggest economy states.
Yeah, if you go to Windsor, if you go to Windsor in Canada, and you go over the Windsor Bridge, I don't know if it's still called the Windsor Bridge, but the bridge that crosses from Windsor, it takes you straight into Detroit.
Right.
Right. Driveway.
Straight in there.
And it's the same as, if you go up to like Buffalo and Niagara.
Yeah.
It's like there's crossings all the way around them areas,
They've got a lot of spare land there, haven't they? Yeah. I mean, it's a huge, thingy, space-wise, it's absolutely massive, isn't it? Land-wise, it's a huge landmass, isn't it? But
I mean, I don't know how many border crossings there are across the USA to Canada, but I'm sure there's hundreds, maybe.
There must be, mustn't there? Yeah, because it's such a long border as well, isn't
exactly.
it? It's probably, it's got to be hundreds.
I saw a photo years ago that was literally just where a line of trees had been cut through the forest, and it was like, that's the border.
Yeah.
And there's no guards, there's no fences, there's nothing. It's just they've cleared the forest a little bit for hundreds of miles.
Yeah.
And you can just go, whoop, whoop. It makes no difference, but it's barren. Yeah.
Is it a hard border like us with Europe, or is it a bit more of like us with Scotland? And is it a real proper?
Yeah, it's a proper border.
With US. Yeah.
To cross it at the key points, the bridges and things like that, you've got to show a passport and stuff.
It used to be just ID for so many places like Mexico and Canada. I think it's passports now.
Oh, is it?
Right. I might be wrong.
I always assumed it'd be a bit more laid back with Canada, sort of like the border crossings and everything. But I suppose it's got to be pretty tight, hasn't it?
There's also tax connotations, and there's the free healthcare in Canada that people cross the border for and things. So there's reasons for it being a bit tighter and not so laxed.
Yeah, because you probably get like medical tourism and stuff like that. I don't know if it's into Canada, into Mexico, wherever. I know we certainly get medical tourism here.
People
for different things. But yeah, interesting. Great video.
Really
it was.
Enjoyed that.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it too. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Cheers. Guys.